Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Certainty Talks. On this show, we talk about certainty, a topic that feels more important today than ever before, but all in all, always an important topic. Today, we've got my good friend and business partner in the Whale Club here, Paul Sparks, not only a successful real estate investor, but also a certified certainty advisor. And we run this show because a wise man once asked the question: if you look at the last 3 years of your business by months and turn all the negative months into zeros, what would happen to your bottom line? That wise man is Dan Nicholson, a mentor to myself and Paul. And we're here to achieve financial certainty by rigging the game in your favor. I'm also on a mission to create 100 millionaires. If you do everything we talk about on the show, you can be there in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you'll become one. Now, if you get value today, please share this episode right now. That way we can all grow together. And throughout this show, you're going to hear us speaking just a little bit differently, slightly different language and verbiage. Might cause some confusion. That's okay. Keep the loop open. Don't try to Google this. Just be receptive. And, please just write your takeaways in the live chat. And after the show, put in your 6-word update in the comments below. So today we're going to be talking about the danger in seeking consensus. But before we do that, let's jump into 6-word updates. You want to go first, Paul?
My 6-word update is long week, need time to recharge. So, we flew into Tampa for the Collective Genius event on Sunday, first thing out, flight out Sunday morning. Those are just packed days of, information and networking. And so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all sorts of networking. Thursday, I got back to just all the pile of stuff that I had to take care of. It's a long day there. And then all day today, I was at a conference where they're talking about mass timber, which is a pretty cool innovation in building materials. It's like a replacement for concrete and steel and cool stuff like that. A buddy of mine wanted me to come. So yeah, just putting out a lot of energy this week, and I'm looking forward to recharging over the next couple days. So
Gotcha.
how about you, Steve?
For me, the 6-word update is people think they're not most people. And so when we're judging all these other people, we fail to recognize that we're included in that group of people that we're judging, which is really kind of why we're talking about the danger in seeking consensus. So, Paul, danger of seeking consensus. What is that about?
Well, there's certain. I think we're just going to pull this apart in a bunch of different ways and talk about it from a bunch of different angles, but we've been taught a lot of our lives to go out and ask for advice, right? We want to do something. And what's the first thing that we do is we go out and we ask a couple people, what would you do? Well, if you were me, how would you handle this? Or, if you're going to get into real estate, how would you approach this? And, this is a concept that only recently I learned from Nick and Dan, and through taking the CCA and reading the book, Rigging the Game, around the concept of playing your game. And when we seek consensus too early in the process, a lot of times that's just we're compensating for the fact that we haven't really clearly defined what we want in life. So we just go to somebody else to try to say, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Steve, I'm sure you've had countless number of people come to you and say, Steve Trang, if you were me, what would you do in real estate?
And there was a time where I would have just prescribed. I would have just, it's easy. I'm glad you asked. You came to the right place. And I would just start telling them what to do. I mean, it was probably the worst for me when I was helping people make valuable, really significant life decisions, right? As a realtor. I'm showing you some houses. It's like a 50-50, like, which way do you want to go? I'm like, Steve, which one should I buy? It's like, this is your house. Like, it can't get any more personal than your house and your family and all your life decisions. I can't tell you which kitchen to create memories in. But, I mean, I also knew if I didn't help them pick, they weren't going to pick. So I had to help. I had to make that decision. But it was always like the ultimate for me of preference versus binary is like, which house should I buy?
Yeah. So you said preference versus binary, and that's the second wealth commandment that we talk about. And what does that mean to you?
I mean, we talk about preference versus binary in the past. Is that there are things that are either true or they're not. fairly binary, and then preference is
What
like,
would be an example of that?
well, is the sun up?
Hmm.
Right? Is the sun up? Are we live on YouTube right now? Which can be
Yes.
true or false depending on when you listen to this, right?
Sure.
Um, did we have a? I guess not. Did we have a good event today? But um, but these are just factual. You can Google it, right?
Hmm.
Or you can chat GPT it depending on what you want to do today, right? But there's an answer out there that's a right answer, right? What's 2 plus 2? I would say it's always been 4, but given Common Core and everything else today, who knows? But that's binary. Preference is, like, what's your favorite color? Or Paul, can you pick my favorite color for me?
Hmm. Yeah. And it depends, right? The preference question comes down to like, well, it depends every single time. What color is the sky?
Well, it
Well,
depends.
yeah. I mean, maybe that's not the best answer. That's the question I've used in the past. Well, the sky's blue. It's a right or wrong answer. But when you ask somebody, what's my favorite color? A lot of people are quick to give advice, right? They're quick to tell you, well, your favorite color should be blue. Your
Well, I
favorite color
mean,
should be green.
but I mean, most people, Paul, the favorite color is blue, so yours should be blue,
Right.
according to research.
Yeah, but so the danger in seeking consensus is that you're asking someone to make a to give you advice on something, and they don't really have all the information, right? I mean, let's both agree, because we'll frame this around real estate.
Mhm.
Is there a right or wrong way to do real estate?
The beauty in real estate is that you literally can create a business that's actually catered to your personal preferences. So,
Right.
I started as a realtor. I read Think and Grow, not Think and Grow. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I was like, oh, passive income is the way to go. And then I meet a real estate broker. It's like, oh, that's fascinating. Let me become a real estate agent. And after about 10 or 11 years of abuse, it's like, you know what? Actually, I like this flipping houses thing better. And then after that, it's like, you know what? I actually kind of like this wholesaling thing better. But I didn't know what I wanted until I had been doing this for quite some time. Took a few years to realize I actually don't like being a realtor, turns out.
I mean, there's a lot of that's not being considered when you ask that question. If I
Yeah.
was to come to you and say, well, hey, I want to get started in real estate, I'm sure a lot of people ask you this.
Mhm.
What should I do?
Well, what do you
And
want to
again,
do? Which is frustrating for them to hear.
exactly. But what you're really doing is you're pushing it back to, and we've talked about this so many times on this show, the solvable problem.
Hmm.
And there's a reason why we talk about this so often, is because so few people actually have clarity on that. I'm not talking about setting yearly goals. I'm talking about, like, what is the problem you're actually trying to solve in your life?
Hmm.
And first of all, we got to get clear on that. So right now we're going through the next group of whales. I think there's going to be actually like 24 starting next week, which is great.
Awesome.
But the very first question that we're talking about is, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
And without having clarity on that, it's really difficult to try to pick what strategy or what way you should go. And I think that's also frustrated me in the past, because now that I look back, I can see that most people don't think that they're most people. Like you said in your 6-word update,
Yeah.
most people think that, at least the people giving advice think that, well, I've figured it out, right? I know the best way to do this. And they're quick to give advice. Here's what you should do.
Hmm. Well,
Now it's
and
a
on that
blanket
point,
statement. Not everyone's that,
but on
but
that point, right? Like, I figured it out. And really, the truth is somewhere in there. And the truth is, if you figured it out, you figured it out for you. You figured it out
Bam.
for you. And at this age, with this risk tolerance, with this cash position, with this cash flow position, with this net worth in this city, right? Like, there's so many things at play here. Because I was actually on a panel at the Arizona RIA, this a few months ago, And the lady's like, I got stuck with this flip. What should I do with it? Should I turn it into an Airbnb or try to sell it at a loss or what? Right. And on this panel, there's me, there's a flipper, there's a buy and hold guy, and can't remember what the fourth guy was. I feel really bad about this. But three of them gave like very specific advice, which sounded like advice they would have given themselves. And my answer, which is totally unpleasant on a panel, is like, I don't know. I don't know the first thing about what's going on in your world. So the answer really depends on what is your cash position? What is your monthly income position? What is your risk tolerance on running an Airbnb? What is your history of running an Airbnb? Ask all those questions. I don't think I don't think anyone was satisfied with my answer, but that's the only answer I can give now, knowing what I know.
Open loop stuff. We talk all the time about the danger of trying to close loops too quickly, because that's what we want. We just want resolution. Just tell me what I should do so I can go out and get some relief from this anxiety that I'm feeling. But what we know is that, there are a lot of binary yes or no, right or wrong, 0 or 1 based questions out there. But most questions are preference based. And the answer is, unfortunately, it depends, right? And we don't want to hear that. It depends. And so let's talk about, some examples of preferences. When we say that word, I think I want to bring some clarity to what we mean by that. So like, you just kind of alluded to it there. But like, what's your risk tolerance? How does that factor into decision making? Are you someone that's got a really high risk tolerance? Well, then certain strategies might better fit your personality. You got a really low risk tolerance, then doing a pop top may not be your best strategy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, like if you were in San Francisco, you're like, I want to do deals in my backyard. What should I do? I would definitely not recommend Burr. Right? It just is not going to be. It's just not going to be a model that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think if we were to say like, based off what I've learned, the absolute worst violation of this principle, I would say, is Dave Ramsey in debt. Right? He's like, no one should have debt. Debt is bad. But he's also a person that got crushed by debt at one point in his life. But he is prescribing a debt-free lifestyle for 100% of America when that is not true for 100% of America.
And you said the word should, which it triggers me. I'm like, oh, don't tell me what I should or shouldn't do, because you don't understand my preferences. You don't understand another one would be strengths and weaknesses, right? What are you good at? When I ask that question, should I do cold calling or should I do direct mail? I don't know. Depends. What would that depend on?
Cold calling or direct mail, it depends on what are your resources like. What's your budget? Can you take calls at all hours of the day? If you're cold calling, really you're only taking leads during the hours you're cold calling. If you're doing direct mail, you better be attached to your phone 24/7, right? So you have systems in place to deal with all of that. You have the KPI metrics because direct mail is expensive, super lucrative and profitable done right, super expensive and costly if done wrong. So, how good are your systems? How good are you? You have 6 months of reserves for marketing, right? If you don't have at least 3 months of reserves in marketing, you shouldn't start direct mail. So lots of questions asked there. So like we talk about it, right? Like the danger or, how we resolved it. But so what is a situation that you've experienced where you felt like seeking consensus set you back in one way or another?
Man, I hope this doesn't rub too many people the wrong way, but I'm just going to tell it like it is from my perspective. I was a sales guy for about 8 years before I got into real estate, and my strategy was always to get 1 or 2 deals every single year. And like, it drove my managers nuts because I would make my entire quota in one deal. Bam. Right. And that was just my style. I don't know why that was the case. I just sort of gravitated towards that. In fact, at my old company, they called me the whale hunter because like everyone out there is catching fish on the reg, but like Paul's out here building this, thing to take down this one whale. And it has a lot to do with my risk tolerance, right? Like if that deal didn't go through, that's going to be a really tough year for me.
Yeah.
But that's how I approached business. And for right or for wrong, that was a preference for me, right? It depends. Is that the right way to do it? Well, it depends. It worked for me. I was very successful doing that. And so then I got into the real estate game, and I had a couple guys. Actually, I bought a house from a brand new townhouse, and I got to meet the two guys that built that house. And I was just blown away by not only by the product, but also by them and their expertise and their abilities to do what they do. And so I said to myself, well, I want to figure out how to get into business with those guys. What is it that they need? What can I add value to? And of course, there's really only there's three sides of the real estate deal triangle. And so you've got sourcing, who's finding the deal. You've got funding, who's bringing the cash. And then you've got operations, who's running it and managing it and doing all that. It's like, well, I don't know anything about operating a construction project. So that one's out. Can't really do much there. But I do know how to find deals, and I'm pretty sure I can raise money because it's sales, right? So what did I do? I went out and I started kind of trying to find deals, trying to find capital. And then I got around a bunch of folks who were doing businesses that were really high volume, and got into, a mastermind. Again, Collective Genius has been fantastic for me. But what I did is I got trapped by watching all these other people build these businesses. Turns out I actually hate that business. I don't want to do volume. I don't want to do 5, 10, 15 deals a month. I don't even really want to do 3 deals a month. I'd like to do 1, maybe 2 deals a month. But because I got trapped in asking, an entire community, well, what should I do in my business? They were giving me all sorts of fantastic advice, but for someone else, right? They don't know my preferences. They didn't know I was the whale hunter. They didn't know that I'm not a very good sales manager. They didn't know that I need really simple businesses, because when it starts getting really complicated is when I start losing interest. And so I had to unwind that significantly. And starting about the middle of last year, I realized, oh my God, I've been building a business based on seeking consensus from other people. Here's what I would, or what they would do, but it's not what I would do. Once I got clear on that, what the problem I was trying to solve, what my preferences and biases were, I'm now able to start, getting back to my strengths, which is doing bigger deals and big rips, right? As opposed to a lot of small deals stacked up. Again, that might fit somebody else's skill set and preferences much better. It just doesn't with me.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was really cool. We're talking about Collective Genius. There's a guy in there, Eric Gideson, who I look up to tremendously. And he and Phil in San Diego, they run like the best like operations for recruiting, right? Like they have the best recruiting onboarding I've ever seen, right? I would even argue outside of real estate, And I was like, Eric, can you just do me a favor? I just want to learn a little bit more about myself. Can you send me whatever tests you have everyone take before you even interview them? And he did. And I took it. I looked at it. I was like, well, that's interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about all these results. And I asked him, I was like, hey, what do you think? He's like, well, I would never hire you. It's like, okay, what does that mean? He's like, you're unemployable. I would never hire you to run sales. I would never hire you to lead any division. I was like, wow, that's extraordinarily direct, right? He's like, but I'll tell you what, I'd be happy to partner with you in any business venture. Like, okay, well, there's something promising there, right? And basically what he said was, my need for autonomy is so freaking high that I am unmanageable, which obviously is the case, right? And so when we talk about preference versus binary, or what consensus, or what consensus looks like, this is not quite consensus, but it's like 99%. And 99% is go to school, go get good grades, go get a job, go work 9 to 5, retire at 65, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with that message. I think it's a good message for at least 90% of the population, but it's not for 100% of the population. And
it's a generalized message, right?
yeah,
For the average person. But like, if you're trying to live a above average life, you really shouldn't be taking advice built for the average. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It
yeah,
just means that like you have to consider the context of who's giving the advice, right? And your own solvable problem and your own biases and preferences and all this sort of stuff. Man, that is, I'm so glad you brought that example up,
yeah,
because how many of us were told you got to get that, 4.0 in high school. Why? So you can get into a great college. Why? So you can get a great job, obviously, and
right,
work at a great place so that you can make a bunch of money and you can retire at 65.
right.
And our parents weren't wrong telling us that.
No, they were not.
They were wrong. I shouldn't say they were wrong, but like they're right in their case.
Hmm.
That may have been what they did. And now, of course, they're, giving
It's what they
advice.
desired. It's what they
Yeah.
desired for them, for sure. And I think going back to so that's where like things can go wrong. And it's not like it's terrible, right? Like I don't regret it. I didn't like leave college with all this massive debt. It was just like so many people are like, so you went and got a master's degree, you went to go work for Intel, and you did all these things, and you're just gonna throw it all away. It's like, or I'm gonna throw away the last 70 years of my life trying to, you know, like investor frame, knowing what I know now, would I do this again? Like, should I just be an engineer for the rest of my life? Because that was the consensus, right? There were only two people that told me to quit my job. Everyone else is like, you should definitely stay at Intel. You're making a lot of money, and you're not working. You're not working that hard. That was the overwhelming consensus, right? So, but yeah, I mean that for me, that is an area where if you want everyone to agree, or was it the way Nick and Dan put it, is if you're along with the ride, not their words, but if you're along with the ride with consensus, then you're gonna get mediocre results.
That's right. If you're asking for generalized advice, you're going to get generalized results,
Yeah.
average results.
So
Do you think that extraordinary people that do extraordinary things are taking advice from the average? No, they're not.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know.
Because
Elon kind of is on Twitter. He's just doing his little Twitter polls.
well, what does Nick and Dan say that like the majority of people that are, they were weird before they were eccentric,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
The weird people aren't sitting out here saying, "Well, what should I do? What would you do if you were me?" They're making their own decisions from their own operating system, and then they're seeking consensus after they've kind of determined their own solvable problem, determine their own preferences and biases and things like this. I know we use those phrases all the time. But the idea is like, it's like know thyself,
Hmm.
right? Sun Tzu in The Art of War, he says, know yourself and you can fight 1,000 battles without peril, or something like that.
Yeah.
The point is like, how can you go have incredible, extraordinary success if you're constantly asking other people what you should do? And these people at best are only going to give you generalized advice.
With good intentions, right? Like, just to be clear here, like no one's lying to us, right? It's just good intention. So let me ask a question this other way, right? To kind of like drive home this point. So Paul, the average American male is about 5'10". So do you buy the average shirt for the average American male?
It would be a belly shirt for me. So no.
Right? You're 6'2",
Yeah.
right? So the average shirt in America would probably be a little uncomfortable for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you had some other examples too to go through.
I do. The one that really hits for me is, should I build I think the danger here is like, I didn't overtly ask this question. I just started getting around other people that were building a certain type of business. And I guess I want to clarify and say all the things that I've learned in masterminds and all this sort of stuff is extremely helpful. It's not like it's wrong, right? This is always, it depends. None of this is binary. It's all preference based. So I learned a lot of strategies to build businesses that I don't actually want to own. And so, that question of, well, should I try to build a volume-based business around, wholesaling, novations, retail, all that type of stuff? Or should I build a home run hitting type business? And the answer is, of course, it depends. And let me say one more thing. It's not all or nothing, right? It doesn't have to be this like, well, I'm either doing this or I'm doing this. Um, there's levels to this, man,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that was actually something I was going to ask, right? But you already touched on it. But like the mastermind is super valuable. I would attribute a good, healthy chunk of my success to being in a mastermind. All we're saying is first, be aware of your own biases, your own preferences, and then sift and sort, right? Does this apply to me? Would me adding this marketing medium get me closer to my solvable problem? Does this
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that would be in alignment with the lifestyle? That's what we talked about yesterday on Part in the Disruption, right? Like, if you want to get into wholesaling, if you're listening and you haven't started wholesaling, you want to get into wholesaling, ask yourself the question: does what these guys talk about align with the lifestyle that I want?
Right.
Right? Because if it doesn't, then you shouldn't do it. Like we're fortunate to live in a country where you shouldn't have to do something that you're miserable doing. Right? You can
Yeah.
find something, you can do something that makes you fulfilled. This isn't chase your purpose, chase your passion. I think those are all great things, but that's just too simple of a statement. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. Well, and let me just like I'm extremely biased. So you might be listening to this and you may not struggle with this. So I'm speaking strictly from my perspective. I have an unreasonable tendency to skip, collect, and analyze. You know, we've talked about CASE, collect, analyze, strategize, execute. It's an acronym to help us like hopefully make less mistakes, right? And the reason why this happened to me is because I didn't take the time to identify this glaringly obvious bias that I carry, which is like shiny object syndrome is another way of saying that. Or you could just call it in another sentence like get rich quick, right? You hear this strategy and all of a sudden you're like, "Ooh, I could probably do that. I think that I could make some money doing that."
The
And so
inner
you just do it.
squirrel, the inner squirrel is really powerful.
The inner squirrel, that's great. I have a terrible inner squirrel, and, you know, he never shuts off. He never shuts off. Even when I think that I'm, like, reasoning from the bottom up, I I have to have people like you and people like the folks in the Whale Club to be able to be like, "Dude, you're doing it again. You're jumping right to strategize and execute, and you haven't considered how does this fit with your solvable problem? What rules do you need to and so the answer really is like, what rules do you need to define up front so that you don't let this happen anymore? So one of the things that I've done now is anytime I'm going to a mastermind event, I am like furiously writing down what my solvable problem is, what the rules like you are only allowed to do one thing that you hear here. And you've got to run it through the four lenses that we talk about in CASE. I don't know if we want to elaborate on that today, but the point is like you have to figure out and get clear on your own biases up front. Because if you're like me, you're just going to be like, "Ooh, squirrel," and see that shiny object or whatever that thing is, and you'll start chasing it. But again, identifying that bias has helped me. Doesn't mean that I'm not subject to it. Just because I'm aware of it doesn't mean that I don't make that mistake over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things is learning about ourselves. Because I shared about it last week, right? It's like this idea that just because we teach it, just because we've learned it, just because we've gotten better at it, does not mean we've mastered it, right? Like the mistakes I've made, I look back and it's just laughable. It's like I did that again. I can't believe I did that again.
Yeah. What are some questions, or I should say, what is a decision that you've had to make lately
Hmm.
that was by conventional wisdom not the right, quote, right answer,
Hmm.
but it was right for you? And how are you able to identify that?
Hmm. Well, I could say for sure, without a doubt, it was cutting marketing last year. Everybody said cutting marketing is a mistake. And by the way, on the outside looking in, I would generally say cutting marketing is a mistake. right? So I would say there was two of them actually. One is we cut marketing, and B, we didn't let anyone go. I would say those two things are the ones that went completely against the grain, right? Because you and I were on a call where a very well-respected person said, "You got to cut expenses," right? But the expenses he cut were people, right? And I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it. It's just I don't like. I have a really hard time letting go of people that I feel like I owe them. I need to take care of them, right? And that is not a common mindset, but it's something that for me, I don't know why. I just feel like I have to like, take care of everybody. So
Yeah.
I think there's that. And then cutting marketing. Everyone said you're insane for cutting marketing. Now is the time to double down, right? Market's cold, everyone's scared. Now is the time to double down. Well, for me, I'm at a point where until I met you, right? Until I met you, if you look at the risk bar, the slider on risk, it was at 99.9999, right? The only time I'll ever say no is if there's a possibility of death, right? Like,
Total, complete devastation and ruin.
right. So I won't jump out of a plane. I'm not going spelunking. I know we can reduce the risk, but it's not zero, right? There's a non-zero chance of dying, right? So if I'm going to take a risk, I'm going to go for it. And it wasn't until I met you, and as a result, met Nick and Dan, and learned about solvable problem, and giving myself permission to reduce risk. Because until I met you guys, I was always willing to just keep going. Like double down, triple down, let's go, right? And so for me, as the market shifted, and I was learning about solvable problem, don't get blown up, this and that, I said, for me, it is more important to survive this winter than it is to be gobbling up market share. But if you talked to me a year and a half ago, I guess 12 months ago even, I would say double down. Down market is the time to increase market share. What was it? It's burn the boats. It's, fire everything. Like, let's go. Right. So it's just, I would say that is where I'm definitely going against the grain. And consensus is do not cut back on marketing, double down.
That's really good. And so the second wealth commandment is that is preference versus binary. We have to remember that. But the third is that every decision has an infinite number of trade-offs. And what that means to me is that when you choose to do one thing, you're eliminating a whole infinite number of possible things you could have done with your time or resource or whatever it is. And I want to sort of tie this trade-off conversation back into the timer acronym that we've used. So for those that aren't familiar with it, we use an acronym, and that's actually A timer. So A is attention, time, influence, money, energy, and reputation or relationships. And so when we make decisions on quote right or wrong, what you're not counting for is are the other currencies that are there. It's not all about money, right? Some
Nope.
of us value our impact or our relationships in a different way than other business owners might. Sounds like, and I'm labeling you here, Chris Voss, I learned this technique from you. Sounds like what you're saying is that you valued longevity and being able to take care of your people more than you did the profitability potentially of that particular organization.
Yeah, the essence of people over profits.
Right. And not everybody sees business that way.
Yeah.
So when you ask, what should I do? What they're going to do is they're going to tell you their preferences, which is like, you should cut expenses. You should fire these employees. You should, batten down the hatches. There's a big storm's coming.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I heard that.
Right.
And that may be true for them in that context, but they don't know what you're optimizing for.
Exactly right. Right. And again, we were talking about earlier, like you're answering questions based off multiple factors, one of which is market. I took this into account, right? I think Phoenix is one of the first markets to get hit. And I genuinely believe that Phoenix will be one of the first markets to see sunlight, right? When things turn around. And I am just weathering the storm for that.
Yeah. How about, there's a lot of guys and girls that get into real estate through the single family residential route, right? We come in, there's a lot of reasons I think why a lot of people do that. One, for me at least, it was a low barrier of entry. Like I can get in and I can start slinging deals and we can get going. Um, but there's this next level, right? That
Hmm.
then you start learning about and you see these guys that are playing at a whole different level, and it's the commercial world, it's the multifamily world, it's the, capital raises and all these fun phrases and words that make you sound smart. And like I'm dealing with this kind of pivot. I wouldn't say pivot, but just like point in my life where what I'm saying is I'm not positive the single family realm is going to actually help me do the types of deals and align my life with what I'm doing right now in single family. It's a grind. It's a
Hmm.
lot of work to
Oh
do
yeah.
this volume. And what attracts me again as the whale hunter to these larger deals is that you can make big rips. I mean, you can make 500,000, 500, $1 million. I mean, I was with Chandler Sane last night at dinner and he was telling me all about these premier guys who were pulling in like tens of millions of dollars a year in that market.
Hmm.
And first thing I've like, my squirrel brain is like, ooh, more money.
Yeah.
So I am now starting to go right back through the beginning of this process. And thank God I have, this book Rigging the Game and
Hmm.
this operating system and a community now in the Whale Club that can actually help me make these decisions because more is not always better. And I'm just right in the middle of this process trying to say, well, what would that look like? And let's not listen, let's not try to seek consensus from all these other people, but like, let's get clear on, well, what is it that I want? What is
Right.
my solvable problem? And then we start to reason through, like, okay, then what are the best strategies to actually help me accomplish that?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, right? It's an opportunity. I see a lot of people do it. I mean, I'm friends with people that do it, right? And I can definitely pursue that opportunity. So the question is, what am I willing to give up? And those are the kind of questions I've asked myself, right? Um, I have, and this is a preference thing, right? Like if I want to go in this direction in the multifamily, not that there's anything wrong with that at all. I think that's definitely an amazing opportunity for a lot of people. Here are the questions I have to ask myself. Do I enjoy raising private capital? Do I want to go uh, refocus or shift the priorities of everyone within our organization? Because it's not like we can do single family and multifamily, or we could, but probably not the best way to handle it, right? So we're going to shift all our focus, and then are we prepared to really abandon our wholesaling community, which I've been leading for 4.5 years, right? Because that's talking about like we didn't want to let go of a bunch of people. I kind of feel like, and this could be completely ridiculous, like attached to this community. Do I want to like, hey guys, it's been a fun run. I'm no longer doing this. I'm going over here, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
those are part of the considerations questions I've asked myself.
hmm I mean, what are the currencies you'd be giving up in the timer model?
Well, definitely time, definitely attention, definitely money, energy, uh, relationships. Um, let's see, what was the one? I mean, influence. I would say I would
Impact.
give up all six.
That's so funny to hear you say that because like I think I agree with you. You making that switch, you'd be trading. You might make more money, potentially the
Mhm.
potential to make more money,
Yeah,
but you'd be giving up all this influence, all these relationships, all this, attention. I mean, think about how much attention you have in the single family space.
right.
You'd be giving all that up to just be like, sorry, I'm going to go after something different.
Yeah.
Right. But if you ask somebody in the multifamily space, they'll be like, oh, you got to get into multifamily, man. It's the place to be.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
I think it's kind of like, um, you're about the age where all your friends have kids, and they're trying to convince you to have kids,
Yeah.
right? But then there's also the suffering that's associated with having kids, right? Because I see like my wife was telling me, oh yeah, her friend, she's going to Singapore, Vietnam, and I think Thailand, and there was another one starts with an M. Anyway, like she's going to all these countries. Like, and in my head, I'm like, must be great not having kids, right?
Right.
But then you have all these other people like that have kids. Like, when are you gonna have a kid? Like, it's life changing. And it's like the joke is like it's kind of like you secretly want people to suffer with you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's such a good one. I mean, I'm definitely feeling that from a lot of our friends right now. Like, you got to have kids, or how about your parents being like, when are you guys gonna have kids?
Yeah.
Like, well, we're practicing, first of all, so leave me alone. But secondly, it'll happen when it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much danger in like letting other people make your decisions for you before you've gotten clear on what it is that you want. And so I want to be clear. I'm not saying don't ask for advice. That is not the message here. The message here is that like it should not be your first thing that you do. And that is, I've found in my experience with my own life, I have a tendency to do that because I don't want to take the time to get clear on the things that I want, to get clear on, because I have such a massive, strong bias towards skipping, collect, and analyze. It's like, what would you do if you were me? Just tell me what I can do so I don't have to do any of that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just go execute on what you think is best for my life.
Right. And I think the other thing, so there's two things here, right? So you're saying definitely ask for advice, right? So again, it's not don't ask for advice. It's really two things. A, be very clear that you know what you want. We call it solvable problem from our good friend and mentor, Dan Nicholson, right? Go to riggingamazon.com if you want to check out that book, right? So I think that's the first thing, right? Being very clear on what you want. And then B, make sure you're asking the right people, right?
Yes.
It's not, you got to find someone, we say this all the time, right? Find a mentor that resonates with you. Find someone that's living a life that you want to live, right? So, if you want a Lambo and a nice watch, go get coached by those guys.
Don't listen to me.
Yeah, don't listen to me, right? If you want someone that spends a lot of time with their family, right? I can help with that, right? You want someone that's doing pop tops and living with a lot of certainty. Paul can help with that, right? It's not don't get advice. Make sure you're getting advice from people after you know what you want, and B, that people are doing more or less or have the ability to help you get you what you want.
Yeah, that's so good. It's just don't do it first, right? Because you're trying to ask a binary question. You're asking a preference question as if there's a right or wrong. There's the majority of times, if you can't go on Google and type in, what should I do? Should I go into multifamily? Although ChatGPT might have a completely different answer than Google would. And so crazy world we're living in here, folks.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeking consensus is all about, the root of that is not getting clear on the things that you want and asking questions as if there's a right or wrong answer. But almost always, it depends on what you want, depends on your strengths, depends on your risk tolerance. I mean, there's an infinite number of things that must be considered here. And if you're asking somebody that hasn't done the things that you want to do, they're going to give you what they think is best. And it's generalized advice in most cases.
This is going to be kind of ironic here, but, I'm going to insert it here. If you guys are interested, as far as like we have a community where we're going through these exercises together, right? It's the Whale Club. So, if this sounds like kind of conversation you'll be a part of, you can fill out the wait list in our Google and our YouTube description, or go to realestatecertainty.com, right? So if you guys are interested in having these conversations even further. So let me ask you another question, Paul. Should I use ChatGPT for my business?
Well, it depends. And I'm so glad we went down this track, because it's reminding me of, I'm gonna ignore your question. We're gonna come back to it.
But that question's popping off left and right, right? That's the reason
it
why
is
I brought
popping
it up.
off left and right. And I will use another example to illustrate, and we'll come right back to it. I can't tell you how many people know us, or they know me oftentimes as like blockchain, right? We do some stuff in the blockchain world. And so I would be a millionaire if I had a freaking dollar every time somebody asked me this. What coin should I buy?
Yeah.
And I'm always like, well, it depends. And then they're like, that's not the answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
Just tell me what coin to buy and when moon, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, asking questions like that just goes to show that the majority of people want to skip the collect and analyze phase and just tell me which coin to buy. So back to your Chat GPT question. Should I use Chat GPT in my business? I don't know. What problem are you trying to solve? Right?
Yeah.
And the point is we've got to reason from the bottom up. We've got to stop reasoning from like, here's this thing. Should I do it or not? I have no idea. What does that have anything to do with you? What does Chat GPT have anything to do with you and your life? It probably does, but like, let's answer those questions first.
Yeah.
So I ask myself, and let's run through the exercise. One of the things that I want in life, my solvable problem, I don't think I've shared this on air. I really only share this inside the Whale Club. I'm happy to do it, is to get $350,000 a year with working less than 20 hours a week, work anywhere I want, whenever I want, so that I can play business as a sport. Because I love technology. I love doing deals. I love partnering with people. I just love playing business as a sport. Okay, cool. What are your biases? The biases is to just be like, let's figure out how to implement this right into my business right now. Let's just go do it. Like,
inject it right into my heart.
Exactly. So, okay, slow down there, Turbo, right? Slow down. What are your biases and what are your preferences? Well, I am trying to design a business that I have to only work at 20 hours a week. So does something that can help me automate a lot of my processes, does something that can help me potentially automate a lot of my sales and outbound, prospecting, marketing, would that help me get closer to the things that I want in life? Yes, it would. Okay. So now we talk about, well, you're going to do something new. Do we have a preponderance of data? I'm just flying through the tools right now. So if you guys haven't heard all this, it's like, I get it. You probably aren't familiar with this, but go back and listen to our other stuff or join the Whale Club and you'll find out.
Yeah.
But the point is like, well, do we have a preponderance of data? No, we don't. This is a brand new technology. So what do we do absence of preponderance of data? We take micro steps. It means, what can I do to take really small steps to see if this is going to add value to my business, to see how it might incorporate? So what am I doing? I'm just fiddling around with it. Like, I'm playing around with it in my free time. I'm using it to write newsletters. I'm using it to generate random texts that I can send to sellers and different things like this. Chandler and I were talking last night about how could we get ChatGPT to tell us what areas of town are zoned for a certain thing, right? And then how does that lay in with the future land use plans for the city, so we can figure out, hey, this is zoned R2, but they want it zoned R3. Give me all those names. Wow, interesting, right? So we're not going out and just like gangbusters have been installing this all over our business. We're trying to take micro steps and understand how to get feedback first.
Yeah. I think you probably just started another squirrel epidemic with that last one.
Yeah, probably so. So hope. Sorry, I love technology, man. I'm telling you, blockchain, ChatGPT, AI. I was just at a mass timber conference today. If the squirrel brain isn't obvious to you guys by now, like classic stuff from Paul, constantly chasing the next thing, but now at least I have like some filters to run it through. Yeah, that might be cool and all, but how do I actually make use of this to help me get closer to the things that I want? That's really the frame that we need to have when we're considering anything new.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week, right? Like, Paul and I have a bias towards taking action, and there's nothing wrong with a bias for taking action. There's nothing wrong having a bias for not taking action, right? All we're saying is that if you're like us, we have a bias for taking action and leaping before looking. There's a few things we suggest you look at first. That's really all we're talking about here, right?
Yep.
How can we make sure that we take a jump that's safer, not injury-free, not 100% risk-free, right? There's none of these things. It's like, how can we take it where the downside hurts a little, but if we stick it, the upside's amazing.
Yep, exactly. So before you consider anything, before you consider asking someone else, what should you do? Just make sure you've gotten clear on what you're actually trying to accomplish with your life. And I get that may sound like a really daunting task. And that's probably completely another podcast where we talk about, what do I do if I don't know what I want out of life? What do I do if I don't have clarity on? And that used to like stress me out. Like, shouldn't I know by now what my
You're a
goal
grown
is,
man. You should
what
know.
my purpose is? Yeah. Well, what I've found is that that's a moving target. Okay. So trying to be super rigid as if that's a binary thing, it's right or wrong. You either know it or you don't know it. Guess what? Even the people, my coach, Dr. Jeff, his solvable problem is still evolving, right? It's
Yeah.
it's what he calls the life lens. In different decades of your life, you've got different tendencies. Your biology has tendencies towards certain things. In your 30s, it's to what he calls acquisition, right? So when you're in your 30s, you're trying to your natural tendency is to want to acquire things. Um, so the point is like, don't stress out too much about if you don't have clarity on your solvable problem. You do want to try to get something to aim at, right? We don't want to start making decisions where we're aimlessly wandering around, but realize that can change. Give yourself permission to change your mind. Give yourself position to adjust as you get more feedback.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, guys, if you guys are interested, we do talk about this within the Whale Club with other peers that are interested in identifying their solve a problem, and we're actually working through the exercise together as a community right now. If you guys are interested, go to realestatecertainty.com. Again, a big favor I'm asking, right? Put your 6-word updates in the comments. And with that, we'll wrap up here, and then we'll see you guys all next week. Bye, everyone.